Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something pretty fascinating, I think. It's all about stablecoin adoption.
Right, and specifically through the lens of this place, Yiwu International Trade City.
Exactly. Yiwu, if you haven't heard of it. I mean, it's this absolute powerhouse in China, world's largest wholesale market for small commodities.
The scale is just huge. What was it, $70 billion worth of goods annually back in 2022?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a really critical barometer for how global trade payments are shifting, or maybe how they aren't.
Hmm.
So, stablecoins. The idea, the theory, sounds great for international trade.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Digital currencies pegged to something stable like the US dollar.
the promise being, faster, cheaper cross-border payments, getting away from the old kind of clunky banking system.
Which can be slow and definitely costly.
For sure. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. There seems to be this massive disconnect
A disconnect between
all the hype around stablecoins for trade and the actual reality on the ground, especially in a key place like Yiwu.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's unpack this.
And we need to remember the context here. This is China, which has, let's say a challenging regulatory environment for this stuff.
Right. The authorities haven't exactly been welcoming.
Not at all. They've put out warnings, serious warnings about stablecoin fraud, and they're pretty wary of privately issued stablecoins generally.
Worried about losing monetary control.
That seems to be a big part of it, yeah. So this deep dive, it really looks at why a recent investigation feels like such a setback for stablecoin hopes.
Okay, setback feels like the right word because the gap between the crypto industry claims and the ground truth seems stark.
It really is.
I mean, get this. Chainalysis, they do blockchain analysis, right?
Yeah.
They estimated stablecoin flow connected to Yiwu was over $10 billion in 2023.
10 billion, that's a huge number.
And there were other reports, claiming thousands, like over 3,000 merchants were using USDT with monthly turnover maybe over $1 billion.
Okay, so those are the claims. Big claims.
Huge. So what did this investigation actually find when they went there, boots on the ground?
Well, it found something pretty dramatically different. The 21st Century Business Herald, and this is a respected financial paper in China, not some crypto blog.
Right, credible source.
Very. They did a proper field investigation. Their journalists went out there and talked to people.
Yeah.
And they found that most merchants, the vast majority, hadn't even heard of stablecoins, let alone adopted them.
Wow. Not just not using them, but completely unaware.
Pretty much. It suggests those huge numbers, the $10 billion figures, were maybe inflated or perhaps reflected speculative trading happening near the market, not actual trade using stablecoins by the merchants.
So it kind of bursts the bubble on that narrative of mainstream adoption and trade.
It's a significant challenge to it, yeah. A crushing blow, you might even say.
So it's this fundamental knowledge barrier. That seems like something the whole crypto space maybe underestimated.
I think so. It's easy to get caught up in the tech bubble.
And the merchants themselves, they voiced concerns, right? Compliance, costs.
Yeah.
It sounds like even basic education just hasn't landed.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here and kind of damaging for the adoption story is who these merchants are.
What do you mean?
Well, Yiwu merchants, they're probably some of the most internationally focused traders in China. They deal with foreign currency, complex logistics, different payment systems all the time.
Right, they're sophisticated players.
Very. So if even these guys, who are already navigating global trade, are largely ignorant of stablecoins.
It suggests the value proposition just isn't clear enough or compelling enough.
Precisely. The technology hasn't shown them a clear why. Why should they bother learning this new, potentially risky thing? What's the concrete benefit that outweighs the hassle or the fear?
Okay, so fear. Let's talk about that. Because beyond just not knowing, the investigation found real compliance fears.
Oh, definitely.
Merchants literally asking, will my card be frozen? That's pretty direct.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? It highlights this paralyzing fear that comes with regulatory uncertainty, especially in China's financial system, which is known for being strict.
Yeah. But isn't the whole point of crypto, or part of it, supposed to be about avoiding some of that control? More financial freedom. How does it end up creating more fear?
That's a great question, and it kind of gets to the heart of the problem in this context. When the official line is caution, warnings about instability, potential crackdowns.
Then the risk feels very real for a legitimate business.
Exactly. They face actual risks, account freezes, penalties. It's not just theoretical FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's based on the signals they're getting.
So it creates this weird cycle.
Totally. The legitimate businesses, the ones you'd actually want to adopt this for mainstream use, they steer clear precisely because it lives in this regulatory gray zone and is associated, fairly or unfairly, with illicit activity.
The risk just outweighs any potential reward for them.
For most of them, yes, the balance isn't there.
Okay, so lack of awareness, major compliance fears,
Hmm.
and then there's the cost thing. This one surprised me a bit.
Yeah, the cost perception was interesting.
Because the crypto narrative is always about lower fees, right? Like 0.1% blockchain fees versus, say, 3.5% for a credit card. Huge difference.
That's the headline figure, sure.
But the merchants in Yiwu perceive stablecoin costs as prohibitively high or just too high. How does that work? Where are these costs coming from if the blockchain fees are low?
Well, that's where the theory hits the road, right? There are these other costs, sometimes hidden costs, that pile up.
Like what?
Things like exchange fees. You usually need to convert your regular money, your fiat currency, into stablecoins, and then maybe back again. Those conversions cost money.
Okay, makes sense.
Then they're setting up wallets, maybe needing some technical help or infrastructure to integrate it into their payment systems. That's not free.
Right, setup costs.
And crucially, given the compliance fears we just talked about, there might be extra compliance overhead. Time and money spent just making sure they're not accidentally breaking rules they don't fully understand.
So when you add all that up,
When you add up all those ancillary bits and pieces, the total cost of actually using stablecoins can easily wipe out those theoretical savings on transaction fees.
making it economically unattractive, even if the tech itself seems cheaper on paper.
Exactly. The total cost of ownership, as they say, just looks prohibitive compared to the methods they already know and use, even if those are slower.
It sounds like the tech promoters were maybe focused on one small part of the cost equation.
Perhaps. Or maybe just underestimated how all these other factors play out in the real world for a busy merchant. It's like, early e-commerce days, people were nervous putting card details online. The tech worked, but trust and ease of use weren't quite there yet for everyone.
That's a good analogy. And the source of this information matters too, doesn't it? The 21st Century Business Herald.
Absolutely. The credibility of the source is huge here.
This isn't just some random blog post. It's a major financial publication in China. They have a reputation to uphold.
Right. They do proper journalism, field work, verification.
So when they publish findings like this, what kind of impact does that have compared to, say, a report funded by the crypto industry itself?
Well, it carries a lot more weight, especially with regulators and probably with other mainstream businesses.
So what does this all mean then for the bigger picture?
It means their findings, these quite damning conclusions, are likely to shape perceptions much more strongly than industry marketing. It brings professional journalistic scrutiny to the table.
Which could lead to more skepticism.
Almost certainly, you might see more critical coverage from other mainstream outlets, and that, in turn, could make merchants even less interested in exploring stablecoins. It dampens the enthusiasm significantly.
Let's just quickly recap those stark contrasts again. It's quite something.
Yeah, lay them out.
Okay, merchant awareness. Industry claims widespread adoption. Reality check says most have heard of them.
Big gap there.
Transaction volume. Claims of $10 billion plus annually. Reality check, only a few merchants actually support it.
Another huge difference.
Cost perception. Industry says lower cost. Reality check from merchants, costs too high.
The opposite view, basically.
And compliance comfort.
Yeah.
Industry implies ready to go, reality check, major fears about frozen accounts.
Yeah, that's a powerful summary of the disconnect.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you mentioned the timing.
Right. This investigation is happening just as regulators globally are looking much more closely, much more skeptically at stablecoins and crypto in general.
So the environment is already kind of chilly.
Exactly, which makes this merchant hesitancy in Yiwu totally understandable, and it makes the near-term prospects for widespread stablecoin adoption in places like this look, well, pretty bleak.
It's not just about Yiwu failing, is it? It sounds like a broader lesson.
I think it is. It's almost a textbook case of how even potentially revolutionary tech can stumble if it doesn't address the basics. Trust, education, clear value, especially within a tough regulatory landscape. You can't just build it and expect them to come, not when their livelihoods are on the line.
So wrapping up, This investigation from the 21st Century Business Herald, it really does feel like a significant blow to those grand narratives about stablecoin adoption taking over trade.
It really does. It exposes a much deeper gap between the crypto hype and the actual merchant reality than maybe many people realized.
Yeah.
You've got this perfect storm, really. The lack of basic knowledge, the very real fears about compliance, the surprising cost issues from their perspective, and just this cloud of regulatory uncertainty hanging over everything.
It all adds up.
It makes mainstream adoption seem pretty unlikely, at least for now.
Okay, so a final thought for you, our listener, maybe chew on.
Yeah, think about this. This kind of rigorous professional digging by journalists might just be the start. It could trigger more fact-checking of all sorts of crypto adoption claims everywhere.
Like pointing.
So, what does this episode reveal about how new tech often gets marketed versus how it actually integrates into the messy real world? And maybe more importantly, how does that influence how you filter information about the next big thing, whatever it might be?
Definitely something to think about.